Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight podcast, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world to share their insights and expertise so we can all grow together. I am your host, Heidi, and I'm the co-founder of the Spotlight to Scale Accelerator, where we drive revenue for companies by making sure they're seen as the expert, authority, and go-to person in their industry versus just another product or service. And today I am being joined by Kim Barnes. So thank you so much, Kim, for joining me. I'm so excited to be talking with you today. We've been having some conversation behind the scenes, and I'm really excited to dive into all your things because you've created so much. So this is going to be so good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so welcome to the show. So Kim is with Barnes Conti Associates, Inc., and she's going to share a little bit. Kim, can you share a little bit about some things about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your journey along the way that got you here today?
Right. Well, my own background actually was in special education to begin with. And so I worked with kids that had learning problems, smart kids, but reading difficulties, other kinds of learning, social learning problems. And now I work with adults, some of whom are those same kids grown up. But the idea of behind everything I've done is to help people learn to communicate more clearly, to get what they want in a way that works for everybody involved, and to be able to be a leader within their industry or within their community. And so there are a lot of different skills that go into that, but some of the ones that my company has been focused on are things like influencing, negotiating, strategic thinking, what we call constructive debate, that I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. I generally have designed the programs. I've written books that are related to the programs as well as not. So I am the CEO of the company and one of the founders. We are based in Berkeley, California, but we have partners, different parts of the country, and we have a number of global partners as well. So what else would you like to know about me or about the company?
Yeah. So what inspired you you said you're one of the founders. So what inspired you to be part of the founding of your company?
I was interested in the way people work and what inspires them to do the work that they're meant to do, or that they are most fascinated by, and that they have kind of all of their lives known about this and chosen. They haven't always chosen to do their day job in the work that they love best, but many people can apply what they've learned from things that they love doing to the job that they have, and bring that kind of love and energy and excitement and enthusiasm into their daily work, as well as making it possible for them to grow as professionals and as leaders.
So you had mentioned that you are a book writer. You've written actually many books that you shared with me behind the scenes. We're going to talk about two, but how many books have you written now?
I've traditionally published two books with two different publishers, or three books with three different publishers. I also wrote a couple of mysteries that I published on my own, and I've contributed to a number of books by friends and colleagues.
Yeah, the mysteries sound very intriguing. I'm very intrigued by that. But let's talk about your two books. So you did mention constructive debate. So let's start with that. You have a book called Building Better Ideas: How Constructive Debate Inspires Courage, Collaboration, and Breakthrough Solutions. So Kim, what do you mean by constructive debate?
Let me give you a little background on it. One of our best clients came to us one day and said, "We really have a problem we'd like you to help us with." And the problem is there's always the meeting after the meeting. People don't really say what they mean in the meeting, but afterward they complain. They're not bringing their best selves. They're not bringing their ideas. They're not bringing their critiques. What can we do to be able to have the meeting in the meeting instead of afterward? And so we did a lot of interviewing, and what we learned was that was a fairly hierarchical organization, and people were kind of going along to get along. They were doing what they thought was politically wisest. And they didn't really have the skill set that was required to be able to conduct meetings in a way that it brings out everybody's ideas, that it encourages people to debate in a productive way, and that it almost requires that people explore many points of view before they make a decision. I mean, I think all of us know that if you have more ideas, you're more likely to end up with a better idea. But in that particular organization, they were not getting a lot of ideas. They were getting a lot of go along to get along. So at first, what we did was put together a workshop where we identified through observation and interviews and so forth, the skills that were missing, as well as the skills that they had. And we a model of how to communicate in a way that helps people to bring their ideas together, even when they're quite different from each other, without getting into interpersonal conflict, but really welcoming the breadth of ideas. So what we did was we worked on the skills of it, and then we also worked on how to design a meeting so that that kind of thing is likely to be the outcome.
So you mentioned doing this, fostering this in a way where it's collaboration versus conflict. So what strategies can leaders employ to foster a culture inside of their teams where healthy debate is thriving versus leading to conflict?
Well, I would put it a slightly other way. I would say that leaders need to create an environment in which the broadest possible selection of ideas comes out. And one of the ways to do that is very, very simple. And that is that typically a lot of the leaders I've worked with, they will put out a question and they really mean it. They really want some response from others. And they get one response or maybe a second response, and they react to it. They immediately will say something like, oh, that's a great idea. And then all of a sudden, they keep getting ideas that are similar to the one that they just praised. And so we often think, don't criticize ideas too early. But I would say to leaders, be careful not to praise ideas too early either. It's much more useful if you say, thank you. What other ideas do you have? And wait to give your opinion until the last. Okay. So that's a very simple change that leaders can make, which is just ask for more ideas. And when you get a lot of ideas, then you start looking at them and you start critiquing them. I think everybody knows more ideas will get you better ideas, but very few people practice it.
Yeah, and fostering that collaboration and that, allowing people like that, just asking questions, which I know we're going to get into too, that gives people the opportunity to take a little ownership of what's happening inside the company too, and inside with their team, and it fosters creativity, which is really, really important.
Right. And the other thing too is that if the people on your team are not responding very much, or you're getting ideas that are too similar, it's really useful to say, I'd like to hear something really different from that. Those are interesting, but I'd like to hear something even more unusual or different from what we're doing now. I don't care how wild it is, because we're not going to make a decision right now, but we want to have a lot of ideas out here that we can work with.
Yeah.
So just literally encouraging people to put out ideas that are not necessarily immediately doable. And when somebody does that, to acknowledge it. Thank you. That's an unusual idea. I'd like to hear some more unusual ideas.
Right.
What are we not doing? What are other organizations doing or other industries doing that we haven't thought about? So it's part of a creative process, but it's also something that it doesn't have to be done on a special day that you're doing creative thinking. It's something you can do all the time when you're in the process of getting information, getting ideas, moving toward making some of the everyday decisions that you have to make as a leader.
Yeah, and it's allowing your people to feel valued and heard, which is
That
always,
as well, of course.
always very important.
And but again, remembering, don't praise too soon.
Mm.
Just thank people and get a lot of ideas out there. What you want to praise, basically, and this is true, by the way, for parents and kids as well. What you want to praise is what they do. So when somebody puts an idea out and then they go to work on it and they bring back something, that's really worth praising. But you don't want to do something to shut down all the other people in the room by praising the one person that came up with one idea.
Mm. Yeah, got it. That's a very important point. So thank you for bringing that up because it's so true. So you have another book. You have many books, but the other book I want to talk about is called Exercising Influence: A Guide for Making Things Happen at Work, at Home, and in Your Community. And Kim, I'm intrigued by this title because you're not focused on one area. And many times when it comes to books or programs and things like that, we can be focused on one specific area. And I love that you're bringing in the at home, the community, and at work. So can you tell us more about what inspired you to write this book and how are you bringing these three pieces together?
The book actually followed the development of a program, and that program, Exercising Influence, is our has always been our most popular program because everybody wants to be influential, right? We didn't talk as much about influencers at the time when we started this. Now the word is everywhere. People understand that it means getting your ideas across in such a way that another person will take an action.
Mm.
Okay, so influencing isn't just good communication, it's good communication with an end result in mind. You don't always get that same end result, but the conversation can lead to getting your needs met, getting the other person's needs met, accomplishing something together. And influence is pretty key to everything that we do. So I had developed the program a number of years before, and it was very popular. And people kept saying, "Well, isn't there a book?" And after a while, I got tired of people asking, "Isn't there a book?" And I wrote the book. So
So you decided to write it.
yeah, I did.
Well, in your book, Sizing Influence, you discuss building relationships to achieve results. So, how can leaders effectively balance assertiveness and empathy to influence their teams positively?
We have a model that we use in the program and in the book where some of the time you are influencing in an expressive way, meaning you're sending your ideas out to other people, you're showing them your visions, you're giving them your rationale. And other times you are drawing ideas from other people or you're drawing commitments from other people. So it's two directions. So expressive and receptive. And you do need to keep an overall balance between those two. In other words, if you're always giving people ideas and telling them what you think and showing them your visions and doing all that all the time and they never get a word in edgewise, most of the time they're thinking, but I don't understand that, or where am I in all this, or but I have another idea, and you're not giving them that opportunity. So you want to balance the expressive and the receptive, maybe not in the same sentence, maybe not even in the same paragraph, but certainly in the same conversation. So some of the time I might be asking you questions, Heidi, or listening actively to what you have to say. Some of the times I'm going to be telling you what I would like to see happen. And maybe I'll ask you, how does that seem to you? Or what would it take for you to be willing to try that? So there's no absolute rule about it, but overall, you want to make sure that you're spending about half your time putting your ideas out there and about half your time getting ideas and commitments from the other.
Mm. So having that balance, balancing it out.
Yeah.
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 So I know behind the scenes we talked about skills, and so I want to bring that into our conversation today because I think it's going to be a huge gold nugget for many people listening. Difficult skills. So what is the importance of those? So you have a concept that you talk about called difficult skills rather than just soft skills. So what is difficult skills versus soft skills first?
Well, let's say, first of all, people use the expression hard skills and soft skills, and there's a little bit of judgment in that. The hard skills are the really important ones that are the, the the things that make things happen. But in fact, that's not so true.
Mm.
The word soft, I don't think well describes the kinds of skills that you need in order to really accomplish things in the world. So we use the word difficult because in fact, for most people, they are more difficult. The hard skills you tend to learn in school. The difficult skills you tend to learn through experience, through models, or if you're lucky, through being able to take a class or find a way of learning about them from others. So what I mean by difficult skills are things like influence, like negotiation, like leadership.
Mhm.
All of those, they're not just individual skills, they're sets of skills.
Mm.
So no matter how good an engineer you are, if you don't have some of these leadership skills, your ability to influence or negotiate with the people you work with, then you're not going to be an effective leader.
Mm.
So it's the combination. Some people's jobs require more in the way of those difficult skills, but almost anybody who is a subject matter expert also has to find a way to get those ideas across to other people.
Mm.
And just communicating, especially if it's something that other people might be a little fearful of, a little uncomfortable with, feel resistant to, you need to have a good set of influence skills in order to be able to make sure that your great ideas that come from your brilliant mind are actually going to find a place in the real world to happen through others.
And I'm thinking about difficult skills, and I'm guessing that difficult conversations is part of that section that could be challenging for most because it's not something we learn, like you said, in school. It's not a skill we're taught. It's something that we kind of learn as we go. So, can we talk a little bit about those difficult conversations? Like, what strategies would you recommend for handling tough discussions, tough conversations? Because we're going to have those with our teams while still maintaining positive relationships.
Well, the first thing I would say is to make sure that you know what you want to accomplish through the conversation before you start having it. So if you're just going to dump a lot of stuff out there, it probably isn't going to land anywhere very, very well. But if you think about, okay, what is it that I want this person to do that's different from what they're doing now? And you really focus on that. And then you think about what are the issues that might come up for that person when they hear this? And what are some of the ways I want to handle those issues? So for example, if I decide, if you're on my team and I decide that, you haven't been doing much lately, and I come to you and I say, well, Heidi, you sure haven't done much lately. What's the matter with you? What's your reaction going to be?
Defensive,
You'll be
right?
defensive,
Yes.
exactly. If instead I come to you and say, Heidi, I'm curious about what's going on with you right now. I I'd like to have a conversation, and I'd like to hear from you what's working well and what's not working so well in your role at this time. Just something where I'm using my curiosity and I'm asking you questions, and then I shut up and listen.
Mm.
And once you have told me some things, I'm probably going to summarize them in some kind of way through an active listening process. And then we'll go on from there. But we're not going to get anywhere if I'm not clear about what your issues are
Right.
and I'm not prepared to respond to them. So and one of the exercises that we do in our influence program is we have people think of somebody that they're really having a hard time with on their team, and they're doing this with another person. And so what they're trying to do is put themselves in the mindset of that person and imagine what must be going on
Right.
while you say things to them. So you tell the other person what you want to tell them, and the other person responds, but then you say, I think this might be one of the issues that's going on for you. So you really try to put yourself into that mindset. And if you can do that before you have the conversation, then you're much better prepared. I think a lot of times we as leaders make some assumptions that other people feel like we do. And so we think we understand the reason why people are doing things or not doing things, instead of taking the time to ask them, but also taking the time to think about how might that person be responding to the way that I'm working with them. Maybe I'm working with somebody who comes from a culture that's very and where they're not likely to tell me much because I'm, a level above them. And how can I get around that? Or maybe I'm talking with somebody who is feeling that they're not being recognized enough, and so they've sort of pulled back. I want to find out about that. So I want to think through the possibilities before I start putting out what it is that I'm noticing. It's fine for me to say that, and I will need to say that, but I want to think about it before I do. And I also want to balance me saying what I've noticed this and I've noticed that, help me understand what's going on, and then I really want to listen to you. That way we're having a collaborative conversation about it, rather than me telling you something and you resisting it or taking it in and not really knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it all comes down to communication, right? Having that open communication, asking questions, because I know when we're in a leadership role or in a team role, like you said, the leader can just focus on, or the person in the management role can just focus on, well, this isn't getting done. And the other person maybe has some things going on that they're afraid to go and talk about. And just asking those questions, you may find that, oh, something's going on in the background personally with this person, and all they need to do is share it. And then maybe there's a solution that can be solved for both parties to make it work, right? Make both parties successful in the end game.
That's one real possibility. Another real possibility is that the person perhaps has a different way they'd like to do it, or some different ideas about how they'd like to do it, and they've been hesitating to bring that up, and this is your opportunity to find out. So approaching your team members with an attitude of curiosity when things aren't the way you expected them to be is much than approaching them with an attitude of judgment.
Yeah, I love that. Curiosity versus conflict.
Well, it's curiosity versus judgment.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily prevent conflict, but I don't think conflict's necessarily all that bad either.
Right. There's a place for it, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And in fact, in the program that we just talked about earlier, the constructive debate program, we're looking to avoid interpersonal conflict, but we're really looking to encourage the conflict of ideas. Because that's how you build better ideas, is by putting different ideas out there and kind of letting them bump up against each other. And you're going to come out with something better than if you hadn't thought about all of these other things.
Yeah.
So conflict is not necessarily bad, but there are some bad kinds of conflict.
There's good and bad in everything, right, Kim?
Oh, yeah.
Could be good and bad in everything. Could be with the food we eat, there's good and bad. With everything, there's good and bad. So you've been doing this for a long time and helping people. And you said like the influence piece, you've been helping people with creating influence before influencer was even like, quote unquote, in the social media space. So you're a leading expert in this space. So in your years of experience in leadership and organizational development, what do you see as the most common barriers to innovation in organizations? And with those barriers, how can they overcome them?
I'm very interested in innovation. We also have a number of programs on innovation, managing innovation, as well as creativity and so forth. But the biggest barrier to innovation is groupthink. You know, it's like, what should I say? What's the right thing to say? How, rather than having an atmosphere in which you really welcome people putting out a variety of different ideas. You don't just welcome it, you encourage it. You even insist on it as a leader. And you say, that's fine, but I notice all these ideas are related to each other. I'd like to hear something that's really different. Okay. So that you're really encouraging that. And the most important thing, maybe I already mentioned this, but is not to stop the ideation process too soon. It's very easy for leaders to ask a question, and maybe one person has an idea, and maybe one other person has an idea, and then it sort of dries up. And they say, okay, well, let's go with that, or let's vote on these. Instead, it's really good to say, you know, more ideas leads us to better ideas. So I'd like to hear some more ideas. What else might we do? And if it runs dry, if people are not doing it, there are a couple of things you want to look at. Is there something going on that suggests that there are some ideas that are righter than others with people in leadership? And if you think that's true, you need to clear that up. You need to find that out. And you need to say, okay, within these walls, in the next hour, we're going to change the rules. Okay. And the rules are you have to say things that you think are politically incorrect around ideas in this company, or you have to say things that are that are things we've never done before. So you can just change the norms or the ground rules. Even in an ordinary meeting, if you would just say the words, what other ideas do you have? It'll stop you from taking the first thing that comes out that probably is not the best idea in the room. You know, great ideas walk out the door, actual or virtual door of companies every day because basically nobody asked. Some of the people with the loudest mouths on your team are not necessarily the people with the best ideas. So sometimes you want to create a methodology that allows people, for example, to share one idea at a time, going around the circle, okay, or write down their ideas before they come. You know, give them the question, let them write down their ideas, and sometimes you hand your idea to the person on the right of you, and they read your idea. I mean, there are all kinds of different techniques that you can use, but all of them are aimed at getting people to think more broadly, to think more deeply, and to think more differently.
Yeah, there's some common themes in the interviews that we're having with this podcast. And one of them you just touched on, which is the first idea is not necessarily the real idea. And just like in sales and enrollment, the first objection is really not typically the reason that they're saying no in the moment. It's deeper than that. So by asking the questions, that's a lot of what I'm gathering in the gold nuggets I'm getting from you is like, just keep asking the questions. Let's go deeper, build that connection. Again, it's all relationship.
There's a tool called the 5 Whys that you may have heard about, which is just a way of going deeper. And it's not necessarily using the word why, but I ask you a question, you give me an answer, and I say, oh, what made you think of that? And where did that idea come from? And what supports that, so that you keep going deeper all the time. We're very likely to take the first thing somebody says to us as being the answer.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we teach in our influence program is how you go deeper and really get to the point. And here's a trick that I've learned and taught, and that is when you ask people a series of questions and you listen to the tone of their voice. I might ask you one question, you'll go da 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 da, and then I ask you another one, you go da da da, I go deeper into da da da, and I go one question deeper, and you go da 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 da. And I listen for that because now I really know what you think. I've gotten to the bottom of it, and people will give you that hint. So it never hurts to listen with open ears, I guess you'd say,
Yeah.
So you're listening not just for the words, but you're listening for the meaning. You're listening for how committed somebody is to something, and you're listening for what's real for them.
Yeah. And somebody said, which was I thought was key too, you're basically saying that is where, not listening to talk, listening to listen, and not worrying about what your response is going to be. Because many times we can be so worried about, oh, I'm going to say this next. And we're missing a lot of information that they're sharing with us because we're not fully present. And at the end of whatever they're saying, you're going to know what to say next. So learning to trust yourself in that conversation and just being really present and wanting to learn more, going back to that C word, curiosity. That's what we're coming back to. So Kim, with AI automation, we just talked about innovation. With AI automation changing the workforce, which difficult skills do you predict will be most valuable for leaders in the next decade?
That's a great question. It will always be valuable to be influential. Okay. And so having a good set of influence skills will always do you some good. I think it's always valuable to be a strategic thinker. I think it's always valuable. And this is another class we teach called intelligent risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with making decisions that involve risk. And with AI, I think we're going to have to take some greater risks. We need to know what is it that humans can do that AI cannot do. AI can gather all sorts of knowledge, but there are some behavioral things that only humans can do, at least so far. And so we need to learn to use our skills of influence, our skills of negotiation, our skills of risk decision making, to be able to move the ideas that come from AI into action. Okay. So maybe we'll be getting our ideas in other places than what we're used to. But in order to get people to adopt them, in order to get people to act on them, we're still going to have to use all those human influencing and communicating skills.
Yeah, AI is not gonna replace the human piece of it. So
No.
I can't. So wow, that was amazing. Thank you. So I have one, the podcast is geared toward business growth, and I love, you are an expert in your space and you've built this business. So what can you share strategy wise or visibility wise, as far as like, what are you doing? What is your company doing to be seen, to be out there in getting in front of your clients in order to help? Because at the end of the day, you want to make an impact. That's why you're doing what you're doing. So how are you getting out there to make, like, what do you have a specific strategy that you're using or platform that you enjoy being on the most or utilizing?
We use a lot of different approaches. Sometimes we go to conferences. I speak at conferences quite often. Having that kind of human connection is good. We do sometimes public taster programs where people can come and get an hour's worth of what we do to see if it's something that they're interested in bringing into their companies. We also do complete public programs now. We do that all virtually, and that's something that we learned to do during COVID. We were doing some before that, but we really got serious about it at that point. It was that or not survive, right? So we use certain lists for marketing. I would like to start doing this again. We used to do things like having breakfast meetings and lunch meetings with local business leaders, where we would have a talk. We would give them some ideas or some, piece of one of our programs, and always gave them something that they could use to go away with. And we often would do that with a colleague with a different business, and we would each invite our own people. We haven't gone back to doing that in person, but we will. So that's always fun to do as well.
Yeah.
People kind of like getting away and being with their colleagues. So I've done that in the Bay Area. I've done that back east, where we have employees.
Yeah, I think that's a great point right there because we're so focused right now since, the pandemic of social media, everything virtual. And
Yeah,
you're not the first person I've heard this from, that's how they started their business was actually doing free. They'll be like, can I speak free in front of your group? And a
yeah,
lot of times people who are building a business forget that you've got something right in your backyard.
yeah,
Take advantage of the organizations that you can get in front of and speak to. So
for
thank you
sure,
for that.
for
And
sure.
I know go ahead.
I will say we also use social media. I put a lot of articles on LinkedIn and Substack, which is a good platform to use for anybody that likes to write or likes to read what other people write. You can find me on there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I I'm not sure we do things that are that different from what other people do, but we do a lot of it.
Yeah. So if
And
you had one thing that you could give advice on and say, okay, if you're wanting to scale this year in 2025, what have you seen like you would say double down on this? Is there any one thing that you could tell a company like I would double down on this?
well, that's a good question. I think I would say double down on finding ways to get your expertise out there, whether it's through writing a book, writing an article, giving a free presentation. But people ought to know you for something,
Mm,
right? You're not you're not just somebody that makes widgets or services,
right.
But you want to make sure that you and your company are associated in people's minds with something that they find interesting or positive or something that they want. So
Mm,
finding the way to create that image in other people's minds is what you really want to do. We do it more through writing, and other people do it other ways.
mhm. Yeah, great advice. Thank you. Thank you, Kim, so much for being here. You mentioned how people can find you on LinkedIn, but let's go through that again. So,
Sure.
how can someone that's listening connect with you? Where can they get your books? For those of you listening, we're going to have everything that Kim has shared, her books, her bio, all the good stuff inside of our show notes as well. So if you're on the road driving and you can't write this down, don't worry, we've got you because we want to make sure you connect with Kim. But Kim, how can they reach out to you?
They can reach me through email at bkbarnes@barnesconti.com.
Mhm.
Maybe you'll put that in your show notes.
Yes.
They can find me on LinkedIn, B. Kim Barnes. They can find me on Blue Sky, B. Kim Barnes. They can find the company, Barnes and Conti, on LinkedIn. And of course, we have a website that's very rich and that will give people a lot of information about our programs. And that's at www.barnesconti.com. So it's Barnes Conti, no and no ampersand, just the two names together.
Yes. Perfect. So yes, barnesandconti.com, B Kim at B Kim Barnes on LinkedIn. And again, and there's so many other ways to reach her, and we'll definitely have all of that in the show notes for you. Go ahead, Kim.
And I would add, you can find my books on Amazon.
Yes. Yes, we want you to grab the books. And so one more time, the book, she has many books. She even has some mysteries, which that's so exciting. You don't hear that often. So the book is Exercising Influence, a guide for making things happen at work, at home, and in your community. And another book is Building Better Ideas, How Constructive Debate Inspires Courage, Collaboration, and Breakthrough Solutions. And you can look at her up on Amazon and you'll find all of her books. So that's an easy way of doing it too. Kim, is there anything, before I let you go, is there anything that I didn't get to ask you about that you want to share or that you wanted to mention?
I think so. Except just to say that, leadership is something we all do in various parts of our lives, and that's why the subtitle of the book is what it is. Um, we're all we're always leading, we're always influencing. Um, we're always following too. So these are not things that just belong at work.
Right.
They're part of your life every day. And if you just change one thing, I would say, or I'll give you two things to change. One thing, before you go into any meeting, whether it's personal or professional or whatever, think about what's the action I want the other person to take as a result, and how can I get there?
Mm.
Okay, because just asking sometimes isn't going to be the way. You can read my book and you can come to my workshops and you can learn more. But that's a really good thing to do. And the other thing is to make sure that you are balancing the time that you spend expressing your ideas and the time that you spend drawing ideas from others. And I'll give you one more, and that is learn how to use silence.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is when you say something, give it a minute to roll around in people's minds. Don't just immediately, if you don't hear something, say something else. So use silence that way. Also, use silence in meetings to make room for other people to speak. So when we talk about communication, we often forget that silence is can be a useful, not all the time, but it can be a useful addition to our skills in communication and influence.
Oh, that is so good, Kim, because that's so true. Some people get uncomfortable with the silence, so they feel like they have to jump in and practice the pause, right? The silence is a powerful tool,
And,
and many
and
times can get you what you want in the end.
I will just say it's too easy to step on your own lines if you do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so good. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, Kim. I'm so grateful for your time and for your wisdom today. Please go reach out to Kim. You can go to barnesandconti.com, connect with her there as well, and on LinkedIn. And she has so much that you can see there. She's got her books, programs, workshops, so much goodness. So make sure that you're connecting with her and checking her out and seeing how that she can help you, your business, and your teams. Thank
And
you, Kim.
if I may add one thing, don't put an and in or you won't find us. It's just Barnes
Oh,
Conti.
Barnes Conti. I apologize. So barnesconti.com. Don't put the and in, but
No,
you can Google her too. So barnesconti.com. Yes. And the company is Barnes and Conti Associates.
right. And thank you for the privilege of speaking with you today. I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. It's been my honor and my pleasure. Thank you again, Kim, for being here. Thank you for listening to the Business Growth Spotlight and podcast. We're grateful for you listening. If you've enjoyed being here with Kim and I, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review and also share it with those who you feel would get support from listening to Kim here today. And this podcast is sponsored by HLH Growth Solutions. If you feel your business is blending in and you're ready to grow your visibility, be seen as the expert in your space and take your business to the next level, then go ahead and download our free blueprint. It's called Spotlight to Scale Blueprint, and you can go grab that for free and download it easily at spotlight2scale.com/blueprint. And one more time, make sure that you connect with Kim. It's Kim Barnes. You can find her on LinkedIn, B Kim Barnes, and also go to check out her books on Amazon and go to barnesconti.com for everything that she can support you with. Thank you again, Kim. Thank you for being here with us today, and we will see you on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlight.